So today we're going to be doing some shibori on a pole. But we're going to use paint instead of a dye. And the reason I decided to do that is I wanted to show some options for people who might not want to get involved with dyeing. They may not have the space to set it up. They may not have access to a water supply. And with paint, it's a lot easier and you can get some of the same looking results. So I'm going to show you a picture of what I did a few days ago. And I'm going to switch to the overhead camera. Let me see what you said here, Sharon. Oh, nice, Sharon. Thank you. I'm glad. Chandler, Arizona. How far is that from Phoenix and Tucson? I was stationed I was stationed in Sierra Vista a long time ago, and I had a good friend that just moved from Phoenix. So, but let's go to the overhead camera, and I'm going to show you the supplies. Actually, I'm going to go to the supply list. I have a list of supplies that we're going to be using. Overhead camera. So you're somewhere between Phoenix and Tucson. Okay. Good. So back here at the overhead camera, and I'm going to show you what we're going to be using today. So we're going to be using an acrylic-based paint, and I've got a couple different paints here that I want to show you. First, I'm going to show you what I like to use. And I buy all of my supplies pretty much from a dye supplier. Massachusetts, I believe. I don't know how well you can see this. But this is Pro and Dye, that's the name of the company. And this is called Silk and Fabric Paint. As you can see, it's a very fluid paint. It's along the lines of golden fluid acrylic. The sound keeps going in and out. Okay, let me move the mic closer. I've got a new mic on order. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Amazon. Echoing. Look, it's taken a long time to get my order. So I don't know if that's because I'm moving my hand. I try not to do that. But I've got this silk fabric paint from Pro Chemical Dye, and it's very fluid. Okay. Another thing you could use is acrylic from Blick. This is Blick's brand of acrylic, and it's a little thicker than the silk and fabric paint that I just showed you. So if you use something like this, I would use a fluid medium or a matte medium to thin it out a bit, because this is a little too thick for what I do and to get the look that I do. So those are the paints we're going to be using. I have one already mixed up here. I like to mix my own colors. I hope the sound is better. I'm not sure why. Last week it was just perfect using the same mic. So I'll be glad. I got a new wireless mic coming, so hopefully that should help. So we're going to need a PVC tube, and I've got a 3-inch PVC tube here. I just picked it up from the hardware store, and I use a lot of different sizes because the circumference is going to determine how wide the fabric is that you can dye with it. So the circumference on this I believe was 11 and 4. And I write circumference on this side with a Sharpie marker. I don't write it on the outside because I don't want the sound is awful. Okay, hold on. Let me see what I can do here. Okay, Ellen, let me know how that sounds. I switched to a different mic. Is that any better? Okay, so hopefully this mic is better. Is that okay? Good. I have to remember which mic that is. Okay, good. I'm glad. So let me go back. I'm going to start back with the paint, okay? In case you guys, that was too echoey and too garbly for you to hear. So we're going to be using fluid paints with this. And I have a couple different types. Well, I actually have one type. This paint is from Pro Chemical and Dye. You see that? It's a company that sells paints for textile artists, or paints and dyes. So this is a very fluid paint, and it's called silk and fabric paint. Okay. I've got a couple colors. Well, I have quite a number of colors from them. But you can also use something like this acrylic from Blick Acrylic. This is their store brand, but this is a much heavier paint. So if you use something like this, you want to thin it out a bit with matte medium or some type of fluid medium. You don't want to necessarily thin it out with water because that will dilute the color and the binders in the paint. So you'll want to use something like the matte medium or fluid medium to thin it out. So as we go along, guys, let me know if you have any questions in the chat. So this is the color that I showed you earlier. This is a paint that I mixed up. I like to mix up my own colors, and so that's what we'll be using today. So in addition to the paint, we're going to need a PVC tube, and this is a 3-inch PVC, 3-inch diameter with an 11 1/4 inch circumference. Okay, the circumference is what really matters because that's what you're going to be using to cut your fabric. Okay. I have some rubber bands. I'm going to use some rubber bands. And I also have 3 pieces of fabric that I pre-cut and pre-stitched. So I cut all of these fabrics, I think it was like 13 inches, and I just stitched a seam allowance to make them tighter or looser on the pole. So I have 3 here, and this one's going to be a little very loose on the pole. This one's going to be medium loose on the pole, and this one's going to be fairly snug on the pole. And the reason I wanted to show you that is you get a different look depending on how tight or loose it is on the pole. The fabric is just cotton muslin, and the nice thing about working with the paints is you don't have to treat the fabric in any way. You can even not wash it if you don't pre-wash it if you don't want to. I always pre-wash my fabrics, but with paint it's not necessary. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to first wet these pieces. I like to wet it before I put it on the pole and apply the paint, because the water in once it's wet, the water acts as a little bit of a resist, and the paint doesn't spread and wick into the fabric as much. I find if I don't wet it, it wicks in, and I don't get much variation in color. Okay. So I like to wet it, so I've got some water here, and I'm just going to wet it in the water. The nice thing about the paints also is you don't have to wear gloves. The paint will usually wash off your hands fairly easy. So I'll just squeeze out the excess water. Okay. Oops. Excuse me there, my mic came off when I reached over to get a towel. So what I'm going to do now is just slip these pieces of fabric onto the pole. And I marked them so I'll know which one is which. And this is a loose one, but not the loosest one. No, that's the loosest one. I want to do that one last. I'm going to do the snug one first. And all you do is slip it on the pole. And the tighter it is, the more difficult it will get to get on the pole. And I've made them pretty tight, and you get a really nice pattern, but it's a real pain to get on the pole. Okay, let me know if you guys have any questions or any comments. Am I moving too fast, or is the pace good? So this is the snuggest one, and it fits fairly tight on the pole, but not so tight that I have to struggle to get it on. I'm going to just open this a little bit so it will go on the pole a little easier. So I'll just slide this a little further down the pole because I have 2 more pieces to put on. And you can see as you scrunch it up, the fabric forms pleats. And since this is so snug on here, the pleats are going to be fairly close together. Is the size of the fabric restricted by the circumference of the pole, of the pipe? Yes, it is. You can make the fabric a little looser, as you'll see with these next 2 pieces, and you'll see the difference in how the pleats form. It can get rather sloppy if you get it too loose. So that's why I have different size poles. So if I want to do a larger piece of fabric, then I need a larger pole. So now this is the loose one, but it's not the loosest one, and you can see how much easier that is sliding on the pole. There's hardly any resistance at all, and you can see how this is pleated up. I hope you can. It's a white pole and white fabric. So maybe you can't see that well. So you can see how loosely pleated this is as compared to this one. Okay. And that's what I mean by you'll get a totally different look depending on how tight the fabric is against the pole. I'm just going to slide this down a little bit more to give me a little bit more room to get the 3rd piece on there. Now for this 3rd piece, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to slide this one on a pole, and you'll see that this one's going on even looser. Need to slide this down a little more. So this is the loosest one. You can you see how much extra space I have here between the pole and the fabric? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put some rubber bands along the length of this, and this is going to help me control the pleating some on this loose piece. So I'll just place some rubber bands. I try to place them evenly, but I don't stress over it. So Ellen asked me, is it easier to put the fabric on when it's wet or when it's dry? I like to put it on when it's wet, Ellen. I find that it does have a little bit more stretch. It gives a little bit more if you put it on when it's wet. If I put it on when it's dry, it seems to be a little more difficult to put on. So I'm just going to place these rubber bands along here, trying to space them fairly evenly. But if I don't get them perfect, it's no big deal. Ellen, have you ever done it like this on the pole? And what about you, Sharon? Have you ever done this before? I know Ellen's done some dyeing, but I don't know if she's done it this way. Okay, drop the rubber band, so let me grab that. Yes, Ellen, this is only the loosest piece that's getting rubber bands. And the reason I do that is if I didn't put rubber bands on this, or if I just tried to scrunch it, it would be just so, I don't like the look that I get. So yeah, I know most people wrap it around the pole, Ellen, and I've tried that, but I just cannot get the look I want by wrapping it. So now that I have the rubber bands on here, now I'm going to scrunch it down. And I hope this is showing well in the video. So I'm just going to scrunch it up on itself. And the rubber band is going to help control some of that looseness that I would get from this fabric being so loose on the pole. Oh, okay, Sharon. So you've done it with rust? Oh, great. Okay. So now this is all on the pole, and it's time to just apply some paint. And for me, the hardest part of working with the paint and with the dye also I have a problem with is sometimes I oversaturate it and the color just wicks into the fabric and I don't get any contrast. So I find that I have to be pretty light-handed, especially with the looser ones. So you can see the middle one here. I'm not sure. Let me hold this up. The middle one, this was the medium loose one. It wasn't the loosest one, but since I don't have any type of rubber bands controlling it, do you see how loose the folds are? And this top one is the loosest ones. If I hadn't put rubber bands on there, it would be even more so than this one. So I like to have it a little bit loose sometimes and use the rubber bands to control it. If I'd have used a smaller number of rubber bands, so less rubber bands, I would have had more looseness like the middle one. But I wanted to show you 3 different ways to do it. So now I'm just going to put the paint on here. Let me put this tray down. I like to use a tray to help catch the paints. So what I like to do is put the paint on and just kind of let it flow. And I try not, I have a tendency to want to cover the whole thing with paint, and then it ends up with too much. If I leave some white space and just let it wick, I even put paint on these part here, even though I cut this off before I used the fabric. But these little strips here that I cut off, they make great little, I don't know, extra fun pieces of fabric. So I'm just lifting this up out of the way so I can get underneath it. So that was the tightest one. Now I'll go ahead and add some paint to the middle one. Try not to oversaturate it. Lift that up so I can get underneath there. And this does dry a lot lighter. As you can see from the photo that I showed you at the beginning, this is the exact same paint. And now I'm going to do, this is still part of the loosest one. Okay, so I probably better stop while I'm ahead because Ellen asked me if the rubber bands act as a resist. If I don't put too much paint on it, they will act as a resist. I'm going to show you a photo here a little bit later where they really didn't act as a resist because I got too much paint. But they should. Okay, Angie, stop. Okay. Okay. So this is what we have. I'm going to let this sit, and I usually just let it sit on a pole and dry. I don't take it off before it's dry, and depending on the weather, that could be, you know, a few hours or overnight. Now I also do the same thing with paint, with dye, but I wanted to do this live stream with paint just to show that there are some other options besides dye. So that's basically it. It's really simple. I know a lot of people do the wrapping like Ellen said. They'll wrap the fabric diagonally around the pole and they'll wrap string and then push it up. I just never get the results that I want with that unless I'm working with a very thin like silk fabric. With the cotton, I find it just so hard to push up on that pole after I've wrapped it and wrapped it with that string. It could be because I'm getting the string too tight, I don't know, but I've never had the results that I wanted. This, I usually get the results that I want unless I put too much paint on it. So Ellen asked about the paint. If you're using something like this silk fabric paint, it's kind of like the consistency of Dynaflow. This that I'm using here, the red, it's a little heavier than that, and I don't remember. I mixed this paint up probably about a year ago, and I don't remember what I used. So I think I might have used a silk and fabric paint and maybe use something like the medium to thicken it up a bit, because I like this, but I really have to be very careful with putting this on because I apply too much and it just totally wicks through the fabric and doesn't give me any type of contrast. So that's basically it. Now I want to show you this picture, which is a piece that I did yesterday or Sunday. It was Sunday. I did this Sunday with the rubber bands, and you lost sound? Is it back? I think I know what happened. That was a technical issue on my part. So that picture that I was just showing you, I did that Sunday with the same red paint with the rubber bands. And I applied more paint than I should have, so it didn't give me a lot of contrast because the paint wicked in too much. And with, yeah, Ellen, I forgot to, this live streaming stuff is a challenge sometimes. I forgot to add an audio source to that picture, so yeah, that was on me. I have to fix that. So what I was saying though is I did this Sunday using the same red paint, but I put too much paint on and it whipped in, and the rubber bands didn't act as a resist like they should have. So the one thing with this paint is the areas that are exposed to the air, the parts of the pleats that are exposed to the air, they wick up more paint and they get darker, whereas the areas that are underneath the pleats, they get lighter. So I still have this on the pole. I'm going to step off for a minute, grab that pole. So it's still on the pole. You can see the rubber bands. And I'm going to go back and switch back to the overhead camera. Let's move this out of the way. And I'm going to take this off the pole. So all I do is just grab it and just pull it off. I'm not going to take these rubber bands off one at a time. And this is a 4-inch pole. Now if you were working with silk, you could actually keep these pleats in here. But this is cotton, and as soon as you press it or wash it, the pleats are going to go away. So you can see how the top parts of the fold darker and the inner parts of the fold is lighter, but there's very little resist. I was hoping the rubber bands, the area under the rubber bands, would remain white. Maybe if I use thicker rubber bands that might work. So the next step is just to take this off, take the thread out, the stitching, and I use a basting stitch, so I can just pull this stitch or this thread. Open this up. So this is the inside that was on the pole, and you can see how much lighter that is versus the outside. And unlike the dyes are transparent. The paints are going to be more opaque. So you get a little different look. The same but different. Okay, let me knock the pole down. Okay, so that's pretty much it. These will dry overnight, and tomorrow I'll come back and show. I'll probably maybe do a few more pieces here in the studio, maybe a different color, and show some results. Probably be a very short stream tomorrow because there's really no rinsing out or anything like that. I can press these tomorrow and show you how they finally look, but that's really it for today, unless you have some more questions for me. So next week, let me talk about next week. Next week I'm going to be working on Itajime Shibori, and that's where you fold and clamp and you get geometric patterns. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for coming. I hope this was beneficial for you and you learned something. Thanks, Ellen. Bye. I'll talk to you later, Ellen.